Firstly, thank you very much for allowing me to take your evening up. I'm sure you all have many other exciting things to be doing on a Friday night. But lots and lots of junior doctors will be in work tonight and over the weekend, and every hospital in the region will be open Saturday and Sunday. So fear not, despite what our health secretary has been saying, in every avenue, hospitals are not closed over the weekend. And I know that to my cost. So last weekend I was on call, the weekend before that I was on call, as were hundreds and thousands of my colleagues. So, across the UK we continue to have a first-rate health service, 7 days a week, 365 days a year. However, our current health secretary would prefer you all not to know that and to increase your expectations of what can be delivered with an increasingly shrinking financial pot. So wanting to deliver more with less, raising public expectations higher, but giving it less funding to deliver on those expectations, so that ultimately an alternative system of healthcare delivery can be put forward and grasped by the general public. And I don't believe that's actually what the general public wants. And what we're seeing with junior doctors is that is being done already. Unfortunately, Jeremy Hunt and his apparatchiks and cronies have chosen the wrong group of people to pick a fight with. And when this fight began, Jeremy Hunt didn't want a lot of attention to it. In fact, many of the junior doctors around the region, around the country, didn't know their contract was being renegotiated. So for 2 years, we were quietly plugging away with various different HR professionals, members of the DH, trying to renegotiate our contract. Because what we've got now is 12 years old, so it predates my time at medical school. It wasn't perfect, but it roughly worked. We knew there could be some improvements, and so we went into what we thought was going to be a negotiation, but it wasn't. It was, put simply, a sham negotiation where set positions were stuck to rigidly for 2 years and there was no movement. And when that became increasingly apparent that what was on the table was both dangerous and likely to deter people from pursuing a career in medicine, we walked away. We said, actually, sorry, we're not going to be party to this. You're asking us to rubber stamp a deal which will put doctors and patients at risk. So that deal that was put forward just over a year ago contained removal of the restriction on our working hours. It paid people less for working on Saturdays and Sundays. It removed people's increments, so the way pay rises as they move through their training. And that meant that the existing gender pay gap within the NHS would be further expanded. And that was something that myself as a trade unionist and me as a doctor who was interested in equality for our workers and our patients, that's not something I could get on board with, and it's not something I could put my name to. So we walked away from that whole process, and Jeremy Hunt and his Deputy Secretary for Health, who was a BMA member, he was a former doctor, he quickly resigned his membership in a fanfare of absolutely no press interest. And then the whole process was referred to an independent body called the Doctor Dentist Review Board, and the Doctor Dentist Review Board came back and gave the government exactly what it wanted. Just apropos absolutely nothing, the chair of the DDRB happened to get an honour in this year's night. So he got that knighthood for services to, well, who knows what. But anyway, that geography professor decided that our current contract arrangements weren't quite right. Now, I'm not quite sure whether a geography professor knows what it is to be on call at 3 AM in an A&E department, but he thought his solution worked. So anyway, the government pressed ahead, and that's when things started to get a little bit nasty, and doctors' blood pressure started to go through the roof. We then discovered that the Secretary of State stood up in a meeting at the King's Fund, and I was fortunate enough to be invited to that meeting. Unfortunately for Jeremy Hunt, I didn't attend, because an ITV journalist rang me the night before and said, you do know that Jeremy Hunt is about to announce he's going to impose the contract, and he wants you to be sat in the front row when he does it and blame the BMA for holding up a progressive 365 days a year at NHS. I politely declined his invitation, wasn't there for him to point out in the audience, so certain lines of his speech didn't quite work because he was going to gesture at us. And then he continued to threaten to impose. And we had people both within our union, which is an incredibly conservative union, with both a big C and a little c, unfortunately. And they said they didn't want us to fight. The best deal would be negotiated, and we were to sort of go quietly. But that's something that junior doctors don't do. And that was when this sort of oil tanker of a trade union, which we've gradually been trying to make more politically savvy, more active, louder, more of an advocate for our workforce that we represent, that's when actually we turned into a bit of a speedboat and the entire movement changed. In the space of around about 3 to 4 weeks, our membership rates, which had settled around the mid-50% range, grew over 3 to 4 weeks to around 80% membership. Of all junior doctors in the UK became members of the trade union, which is an incredibly proud moment. We have more membership in the junior doctor ranks than we do for consultants, staff grades, GPs. This has been a complete sea change. One of the crucial moments was when people took to Twitter and seized on a hashtag, I'm in work, Jeremy. So Jeremy Hunt made a mistake. He said, junior doctors won't be at work. He said, consultants won't be there. And the days after he'd made that statement, it trended globally on Twitter. I'm in work, Jeremy. Now, it sounds a little bit like you're gloating, like you've got a job, I'm in work. But actually, that's the thing that we say to our partners, to our families, all the time. I'm in work, I can't go to your birthday party. Or I'm in work, I can't see the kids this weekend. Or I'm in work, I can't go to my own wedding. So we have junior doctors who actually aren't able to access their own wedding. They can't arrange the time off because of our rotating arrangements right now. Those were the problems we wanted to address in the contract, but they got pushed to the side while the people we were trying to negotiate with fixated on Saturdays, because Saturdays became the totem, what they wanted to claim back, that we were paying junior doctors exactly the same rate for working at 9 PM on a Saturday as we do for 9 AM on a Tuesday morning. And actually, when you think about it, 60,000 junior doctors in the NHS, it's a big number, but it's not a huge number. There are many, many other allied health professionals who work in the NHS, and that's actually what this target is. So it's not juniors, but it's actually the whole healthcare workforce. Because actually, if you can say the doctors, the junior doctors are being paid the same at 9 PM on a Saturday as on 9 AM on a Tuesday, they can then move on to everyone who's on the agenda for change remit and everyone who works in the other areas of health service. And so they can move on. So we really are the thin end of the wedge. And that's one of the reasons why we've seen such massive support across the workforce, because people are savvy enough to realise, actually, they claim the doctors, if they can do this to them, they can do it to anyone. And it's a really sad day when one man stands up before the House of Commons and says what frankly are mistruths, in fact, let's say it, they're lies, and silences the voice of 60,000 people on picket lines up and down the country. It's an incredibly sad day for democracy when that happens. And so through the course of this debate, we've seen someone who supposedly is a great PR guy, who was put in the post to handle the PR, mismanage this whole debate, this whole discussion, this whole dispute completely incorrectly. And that's what he didn't reckon on, because junior doctors, pretty switched on individuals. If you can get into med school, you can certainly take down someone who walked into a PPE course at Oxford, who happens to have got in because his father was an admiral and his cousin, many times removed, was Oswald Mosley. So, there we go. So anyway, we now pitch our battle against this gentleman who's had many of the advantages in life that many junior doctors haven't had, and that's where we go. So, where are we today? Well, we saw yesterday Jeremy Hunt say the same things which simply aren't true. So again, he used the 11,000 excess deaths at weekends. Now, I'd be terrified. If I didn't read the study that he keeps quoting from, I would be so concerned if a relative went into hospital on a Saturday or a Sunday that they would die in hospital over a weekend. But it's not true. For a kick-off, the paper he keeps quoting doesn't say that. It doesn't say that you're more likely to die at a weekend in hospital. It says if you're admitted at a weekend, 30 days later, you are likely to have an adverse outcome. You are more likely to die 30 days later, you're more likely to have died if you've been in hospital at a weekend. But the actual significance of that is tiny. You are more likely, but it's a tiny percentage. We're talking less than 1% increased risk, which actually in the whole scheme of things is tiny. But it gets worse. The weekend in the study is defined as Friday, Saturday, Sunday, Monday. So the weekend is different. Sounds a bit strange. Why would you do that? Well, In academic medicine, we do something we shouldn't do, something called data trawling, where you look at huge data sets and you try and find an interesting figure. Its relevance is questionable, but you delve into the papers, into the numbers, till you find something that proves what you were looking for. Now, more recently, there's increasingly questions about how that paper was commissioned and who commissioned it in the first place. And in the days to come, we may find that people in high office requested that paper to be written in the very first place. What we do know is the findings of that study were released to Jeremy Hunt with the help of Deloitte, the consultancy agency, earlier than anybody else saw them, a month before. So again, there are very serious questions to be asked about the reliability of that paper. Yesterday in the House, Jeremy Hunt said, again, there are 8 papers that have looked at the weekend effect. Now, there are 8 papers. None of them conclude that staffing is the cause of any excess deaths. Only 2 of them look at data from the last decade. So he's quoting these papers again and again and again. He's trying to create a narrative. He's trying to make the whole debate so complicated that nobody off the street can answer what this debate's about anymore, because that's in his interest. Because when you boil it down to the facts, he can't win. So, he also quotes about an excess rate of mortality for people admitted having had a stroke at weekends. Again, simply not true. Tens, almost hundreds of stroke physicians have written to the Secretary of State and said that's just not true. So again, we can't trust what this gentleman is saying. I say gentleman in the loosest terms. So why did he pick a fight with junior doctors? If his numbers are wrong, if he's picked the wrong fight? Well, it's quite simple, because he thought we were just going to roll over. And we weren't going to stand up and fight, and we weren't going to do this, because he was distracted, because he was actually going for the consultants, and he expected us just to stand on the sidelines. But we didn't. And that's why we've seen a huge growth in the membership, as people stand by. We've seen an otherwise quite apathetic, politically disengaged workforce become incredibly politically savvy, who've launched their own fantastic stunts. We've seen people deliver 10-foot copies of how to read an academic paper to Whitehall. We've seen on Parliament Square, we've seen a massive Ladbroke sign that said, I'm going to have to be careful here, Jeremy's punt. And it was looking at the risks that Jeremy Hunt is trying to place the Health Secretary, place the Health of the Public at. And we've seen massive demonstrations in London. Junior doctors, some do go to demonstrations, but traditionally we don't. 20,000 people. There were only 60,000 junior doctors in the UK, yet 20,000 people were at a rally. A third of the whole workforce. All in London, all stood there, all chanting, all asking, where is Jeremy? Because on Saturday, he wasn't in work. Our protest would have been even bigger if most of the junior doctors in the UK were probably working on Saturday, so couldn't be at the protest in the first place. It's such a sad day. Yesterday, when Jeremy Hunt now stands up and says, the only thing I can do is impose this contract. Nowhere in the entire discussion has any junior doctor asked for more money. Many junior doctors have said, actually, we are undervalued for what we deliver, but we haven't asked for more money. The whole thing could have been delivered cost neutrally, could have been delivered without any disruption to patient services, but that's not been the way this has been discussed. So now we're faced with a threatened imposition in August. I'm somebody who won't have a contract imposed on me because I'm coming to the end of my training. But I'm terrified. So I work in mental health, I'm a psychiatrist. I work in prisons. I spend my working day with some very interesting individuals. But I would much prefer to be in the prison delivering the health service there than I would sat at the other side of a negotiating table from our current Secretary of State. Because actually, the patients I see in prison treat me with respect. They actually value the service I give. They are incredibly grateful for what I do when I see them in prison, which is something I sadly can't say for the Secretary of State. And it's a very, very sad day when the person who we're meant to look up to, who's meant to be the guardian of the health service, isn't fulfilling that role. So we now know who wants to oppose, and we're now left with a situation where we're going to have to decide what we do next. So our association, our committee, is going to meet on Saturday, and we're meant to be taking the pulse of the profession. And I can say doctors are furious, people's blood pressure has never been higher, so I think more action is incredibly likely. Hopefully we can do something. hopefully we can bring an end to this and we can safeguard the entire NHS and our workforce. But for the first time in my life, I'm not sure that I could go to someone who's thinking about being a doctor and say, yeah, it is a great career. And that is an incredibly sad day because it's a wonderful job. I absolutely love what I do. But I'm now in a position where I'm not sure the health service continues to be sustainable if this is forced through. And it breaks my heart to say that. So, what can we do? Well, we can write to people. We can try and point out the fallacies that are being peddled by the Secretary of State. And we can try and educate everyone. So, again, as our previous speakers have said, I encourage you to write to your MPs, express your concerns. We've had great support from Heidi Alexander, the Shadow Health Secretary, who actually really took Jeremy Hunt to task yesterday. She was fantastic, just doesn't get enough coverage, sadly. I'm someone who doesn't have particular political affiliations, but whoever it is, whatever your party, whatever your persuasion, just write to your MPs, write to your representatives and try and express it. And if you should happen to live in the Cheshire area and you would like to write to the Chief Executive of Cheshire Rural Partnership or the Lancashire and you want to write to the Chief Executive of Lancashire Care, please do and ask them why they thought it was sensible to recommend this deal to their members. So, there you go, that's all I'm going to say.